Welcome to the Therapist Book Club, where two therapists dive into their favorite books and the powerful mental health themes they uncover.
Whether you're here for literary inspiration, therapeutic tools, or just some lighthearted conversation, you've found the right place.
So get cozy and let's dive into the pages together. Okay, so welcome back to this episode where we are going to be talking with one of our, an author for her book, Stephanie Henson, um, called No School, My Rules. And we're excited to talk about this one. In my practice, I use picture books all the time to work with kids, and this is a great one. If people don't know, Twitter's a really good resource for picture books and meeting authors. And so this one caught my eye because we often are I'm getting calls a lot for kids who are not wanting to go to school for a whole variety of reasons. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit about your book.
So the book basically stemmed from both my experience as a child of not wanting to go to school and having school refusal. And, I'm going to date myself here, but I'm a kid, like a child of the 80s. So back then, there weren't a lot of resources dealing with mental health. And, they thought I was just being difficult and just not wanting to go to school. Like, oh, well, what's wrong with her? Is she being a brat? What's the situation? And the whole time I had undiagnosed anxiety. So, separation anxiety. I didn't want to be away from my mom, and, just made the whole process of going to school very difficult for my parents. And then, they always say you get what you give. So fast forward to when my son was about, I guess, in second or third grade, he started to exhibit, some of the symptoms and the traits of not wanting to go to school and throwing tantrums and having that same, generalized separation anxiety, not wanting to be away from me, having fears associated with school. So I always knew in the back of my mind as a writer that I wanted to write on this topic because I feel like it's universal. I feel like, kids have their reasons as to why they don't want to go to school. I mean, some of them, they could be as simple as being tired and you don't want to get up to go to school. I mean, my son is now 14 and we still deal with that, where he's like, I'm tired, I'm not going. I'm like, yes, you are, you have to go. I mean, this is what we're doing here. Like, there's no negotiation, but that's basically where the book came from. So it's just dealing with school refusal. What are the reasons that kids might not want to go to school? How do we address that? What are the triggers for anxiety and things of that nature?
Yeah, I love that. Tiana and I were discussing, yeah, so anxiety, yes, is a reason why kids may not go to school. But you mentioned separation anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And Tiana, we were kind of talking about, so in our therapy clinic, we'd see like why do they have separation anxiety? I know I have a kiddo that often refuses or doesn't want to go to school, and it's because of disability. Like, and just separation anxiety comes because like it's hard to separate from the people who understand you, and
Right.
can help
And they feel
you.
safe in those situations and they don't want to let go of that safety net, to leave and to go to school. There's a lot of fear. And like my son had a lot of fear of the unknown, they would call it. Like he just didn't know what was going to happen from day to day in school. And that was a source of like such stress for him. Well, I don't know if the teacher's going to call on me. Am I going to have the answer? So when we were putting the book together, John Seymour, who's the editor and publisher of Tealmore Press, who put the book out, he was very adamant about the fact, like, we have to have reasons, like we have to identify, sometimes kids don't have all the answers. So that might be a reason why they don't want to go to school. Or sometimes kids don't know what they're going to wear. And that's a source of stress. And they don't want to go to school because they have a fear of not fitting in with their classmates. So I think, we did a pretty decent job of identifying some potential reasons that kids don't want to go and, have it in the book in a very lyrical and playful way.
Mhm. Yeah. So Tiana, I'm going to go to you. What do you think? Where would you use this in your practice, or how do you think? I'm calling on you as a school social worker. Like, where do
Yeah.
you think school social workers or counselors could use this book?
Yeah. So at my previous job before I was in private practice, I worked as a school social worker. So I worked a lot with the families and the kids that were dealing with school refusal or school anxiety or separation anxiety, whatever we want to call it. But a lot, and we would do a lot of that pinpointing that you described, Stephanie, is like what's the source of this anxiety or nervousness about coming to school, and how can we understand that a little bit more, and how can we mitigate some of that, the concerns.
Mhm.
Whether it's like, I don't know what's coming up next in my day. Okay, let's make a visual schedule so you know what's coming next.
Yes.
Or you don't want to be compared to your peers. How can you cope ahead with that scenario? Like, how can you talk yourself up or give yourself some confidence in those moments where you don't feel as confident? So I think I love that perspective of finding out what is the source of the anxiety, or multiple, maybe there's multiple avenues, but what's the source of it, and how can we mitigate or come up with some solutions to ease some of that worry from kids.
Yep.
That would be my approach working in the schools, is like helping the kids come up with some of those plans, and then bringing the parents in to help kind of coach their kids through it too.
Yep. And I think another important element of the book is not only does it identify some of those potential triggers and some of the, sources of stress, but as they go through the story and as they follow the character, she ultimately realizes the importance of education at the end. And, she can say, something to the effect like, trees don't have to go to school because they don't know what they're going to wear, but at the end she sort of realizes, well, it might be boring to be a tree because they have to stand in a stationary place, and just something like kind of give it like a little like rationality to why it I have these reasons why I don't want to go, but at the end of the day, there maybe I'm looking at this a different way and looking at it from a different perspective, and it kind of gives them those tools to kind of analyze the situation in a different way and say, maybe it's not so bad, and education is important, and I do have to go to school, and I'm gonna try my best, and we're gonna cope, and we're gonna make it through. And that's another thing that we tried to do with the creation of this book, is just to give kids the tools to cope. Because I mean, even as an adult, like I didn't have the best coping skills as a kid. Even as an adult, I find there are times where it's hard to like regulate myself and like get myself into that mental headspace where I'm going to deal with this situation. So I can only imagine what kids nowadays have to deal with, because there's a whole other element of technology, and there's things that I didn't have to deal with when I was in school. And I've seen it with my son, how bullying, there's an example of bullying in the book. Bullying exacerbates sometimes kids not wanting to go, and dealing with all of those reasons, and just trying to address like things in the book that kids might encounter in their school day, to make it more valid to them so they can see themselves reflected in what they're reading.
Yeah. So tell us about your story. Give us the synopsis, and tell us about your character, and if you have it, we'd love to see.
Yeah,
Show
I
us
mean,
your.
here's the wonderful illustration by Mai Tran. She's the
Oh,
illustrator of the book. So, basically, she's just, you can
character.
tell it's written all over her face that she just doesn't want to go to school. And she just, we follow her journey through, her typical school day. And she's saying, kids have to go to school. That is the rule. And she's saying, tired, tiny bodies that would rather stay in bed, running for the bus and heading to class, tests that creep up and cause so much dread. So we're setting the foundation right there. Like, here are some reasons why kids don't want to go to school. And she's saying that it repeats every single day, and she can think of a million things that don't have to go to school. So why should she? So basically, we go through this lyrically. And the reasons are presented first. Sometimes I have to deal with bullies at school, but do you know who doesn't have to go to school and deal with bullies? And then she comes up with birds. Birds don't have to go to school and deal with bullies. And then she's kind of rationalizing with herself, but if they did, they'd be fine, because they fly through the air with speed and grace, and they squawk at foes from above the skyline. So she wouldn't have to worry about it if she were a bird, because she would be able to handle that. So then she establishes these rules. Rule number one: if birds don't have to go to school, then I don't have to go. And it kind of goes through that same formula throughout the story. She'll encounter a sandcastle, and she'll, establish a rule for the sandcastle. If the sandcastle doesn't have to go, then I don't have to go. And then when you get towards the end, like the resolution of the story, we'll just do the bird example real quick. She goes, "No school, my rules. But now that I think of it, I'd love to fly as birds do, but they're also unprotected. Cozy nests are needed to keep them safe from harm. By going to school, I can be brave enough to spread my wings and soar. So she's kind of identifying that while it's nice to not have to go, there are benefits. Like I could spread my wings, I could soar, I can be on my own, I could establish my own, my own identity in school, and it's not going to be that bad. So I always say, like, I don't feel like this book is like the magic formula. Like I don't think people are going to buy it and have kids like read it and like they're going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to school, I get it now. I just think it it gives kids a different perspective on how to look at school. It's not a magic formula, it's not a magic tool, of course, like nothing is foolproof, but I think, it gives kids an opportunity to like be in their own imagination, be in their own minds, and how they might see themselves through this little girl who, encounters these feelings that she has, and, how she kind of has this internal logic, because it's not rational. I mean, of course trees don't have to go to school, but in her mind, she's like, but if they went, they'd be fine because XYZ. So that's basically how the book is established and how the framework of it works.
I I want to bring up a controversial take I think I get in my office. And here I think we will all land in a similar place, but I will have parents come in and they will say, when I was little, I just had to go. People, or you'll hear maybe people of the advanced generation say, oh, our kids have gotten really soft. Like if I was their parent, I would just, their kid, like the parents are going too easy by letting them stay home. I hear that often. And one thing I hear in my office is parents struggling with, when my child is upset, do I force them to go and just like suck it up, or or is it better to let them be home? And so Tiana, what do you, I'm going to go around the board because I know the book probably answers this question also. And I'm curious, because I think school refusal it needs all of us, right? It's like I think Stephanie, you represent the parent aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Tiana is helping us whether she wants it or not. She's representing like when we're working in the school, because I think to overcome school refusal, we need the school to be helping us. And
Oh,
I think I'm representing the like outpatient private practice. There might be underlying things that need to be treated by somebody outside of the school and parent system. And so let's talk about that. When should parents keep the child home, send them to school, make them suck it up, not suck it? Like what should parents do about that?
I would say my lens is a little bit skewed, maybe because I was a kid that experienced school refusal in fifth.
So Stephanie did, Tiana did. I know I did.
Okay, I was a fifth grader, so much older than people expected there to be school refusal happening or separation anxiety happening. And we had just moved town, so it was a new school, so that probably played into it. I was feeling
that's a
some
trigger.
And my mother worked night shift as a nurse and would work all night. And then I did not want to go to school. I cried every single day, so anxious about going to school. I would hold on to her leg, begging her to let me stay home because I had a horrible stomach ache. She would come to school after working her whole night shift, sit in class with me. I was a fifth grader. Imagine a fifth grader who is so worried about peers and like what peers are going to be thinking. I wanted my mom next to me so badly. And there came a point in that saga that went on for weeks and weeks where she finally said, Tiana, I'm not doing it anymore. You have to go to school. We are done with this. Knock it off, suck it up, basically was the message I received. So I had the gentle mom who like encouraged me to go and helped me go through my fears, whatever. And then I had the mom who was like fed up and she was done,
Mm-hmm.
like holding my hand essentially. And I had some significant later on in adulthood fears or perceptions of my mom based on that story and had to do some work around that. So I don't want a parent to just rip off the band-aid and say, suck it up, go to school. There's nothing to be afraid of there. Like that would be the wrong message to send, I think, personally, because I know how painful that is, but also from like a therapist perspective on how scary that could be for a kid to just have the band-aid ripped off of them. So I would want a more gentle approach. I think my mom coming to school with me every day for 2 weeks was probably not great in that opposite direction as well. So when I worked in the schools and I had kids in this scenario, a lot of the times we had to just rip the band-aid off in order to get the kid to transition into school. And it felt very uncomfortable. Like it was often like somebody holding on to the kid in the school while the parent walks away and the child is screaming bloody murder and like terrified and so scared. And then as soon as the parent left, they often settled and they were fine. But it felt awful to be doing this. So there now, as I've been working in my private practice, when I come across situations like this, there's often a middle ground that we're doing of like having a high expectation or a clear boundary that school, you have to go to school. And then let's figure out how to make it more comfortable. Maybe that means a half-day schedule for a little bit while you get comfortable. Maybe it means you can text me at lunch to check in with me, but we're finding ways to make it a little bit more bearable without the parent there, like my mom was in the very beginning. So that's my long roundabout story, but somewhere in the middle, I think we have to find some middle ground.
But I'm guessing, I think back in the day, your mom wasn't probably getting a lot of support from the school. And, like I'm like, I have empathy for her now, as far as like not being able to sleep and thinking, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then that helpless feeling of like, if no one's helping me, then it's just all on me, and that desperation that happens for parents, and yeah, that scenario is really hard because like I'm a pediatric trauma therapist, and I would say the scenario that you discussed of sending a child with separation anxiety and kicking and screaming and holding them is
Mhm.
not a trauma informed approach, and it can create more like
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe it's not big T traumas, but definitely some little T traumas along the way, like you talked about. And what's really funny is I was probably second or thirdish grade. My mom was chronically ill my whole life with multiple sclerosis. And so I was scared to leave her because
Mhm.
she would have episodes of like her throat closing up, or I knew she'd be sick, or we'd be going to the ER. And then I'm trying to go to school. And because she was disabled, she spent months sitting in that front office. And I was just thinking of the parallel between our moms in being in those situations. My mom, that was the only way I could stay at school because of my stomach aches, my headaches, and truly my stomach hurt. I was truly nauseous. I truly thought I would throw up. Like I knew I couldn't eat breakfast in the morning because my stomach was so unsettled. Um, and which is just common with anxiety. Kiddos especially convert that mental energy into the physical symptoms a lot because they can't sit down and say, hey, I'm just feeling like really anxious right now, and there's a lot of active energy going on. But she did that for months. I don't even know, I can't remember how long. And I was somebody that like I just needed to know she was there because I knew she would be safe there, or somebody was watching her, or kids are kind of egocentric. I knew if I could just be around her, she would be okay. um my mom just passed away in September, and I think, man, I spent so many years stressed like that about her dying. And if only I knew that she would be a ripe old almost 80-year-old woman when she
Wow.
passed away of something non-MS related,
Mhm.
it would save me a lot. But I'm like, I'm not trying to throw schools under the bus, but it's such a good example of parents trying to have a gentle approach, trying really hard to do what they can, having so few resources other than sitting in the office. And my daughter started it up too. And I remember feeling that pull of like, do I need to go sit in the office? But I really was like, no, I cannot start that because she needs to. I'm a big proponent for empowerment, which I love the theme of empowerment in there, Stephanie, that you include, because I needed my daughter to know that she can do it. I'm going to help her. I might be an outside helper, um, but I'm not going to like, I'm not going to be enmeshed. I'm not going to like, hold her hand is not the right term, but I'm not going to sit in the office for you, but I am going to work with the school. And luckily I'm a vocal parent for school. Maybe not lucky for them, but for us. Um, and so we do, I think schools are getting better now at being more involved. I think also luckily I'm a therapist of children that age too. So, but that was my maternal instinct was I need to go to the school and sit there. And actually the reduced schooling, I threatened that a little bit with the school. Like, well, she's calling me like she's calling me 10 times a day, no joke. Like she's calling me constantly in, sick or whatever. Like then maybe I'll just pull her and she can do a reduced schedule. And that was something they definitely did not they didn't want to see. And I don't really either, but um I'm just thinking of the role of empowerment for kiddos that have separation anxiety is so important. They understand that like they're going to school to learn and this is going to help them grow in the future and it's not just this like arbitrary daycare situation, right? They're going to
Mhm.
grow as humans. We want them to get that information and you'll be able to protect yourself in the ways the birds cannot. You
Right.
know? Yeah, so I love that. I'm like it is such an interesting dynamic as a parent too, right? Feels very helpless. And I don't know that there's many other books about school refusal, this like laser focus. Maybe there is, and I just haven't seen them yet. I don't know.
When we were researching how to approach this book and we were looking for comp titles, I didn't see a whole lot that addressed it, in quite this way, from like a realistic fiction kind of perspective. I mean, because although it is whimsical and it is lyrical, I mean, there are definitely like elements that you could pull out of it that are, true to life. And, like I said, the reasons for the refusal. And, just going back to what you were talking about in terms of like the school response. I mean, when Matthew was in second and third grade, I mean, I was helpless. I didn't know what to do. So I did reach out to the school and, thankfully they were so supportive. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but I would literally drive to the front door of the school. The guidance counselor was there waiting. The guidance counselor would give it a shot. She would try to reason with him, you know, short of pulling him out of the car, which, was traumatizing, for a little kid, to have like, your guidance counselor trying to like get you out. But, the principal would come out and like when he saw her, there was something that kicked in his brain and he's just like, uh-oh, like that's like an authoritative figure. She means business, I've got to like pull it together. And
It's
the
always
three
my
of us would literally sit in my car every morning and talk to him and say, this is what's going to happen today. You're going to go to school because this is what you have to do. And you have to be a responsible third grader. And this is what kids your age are doing. If you need mom, she's an email away. You can go to the office and call her at lunchtime. Like they made provisions for him that I think in his mind, he felt like he was being heard. Like, I'm afraid to go to school. I need my mom. But at the same time, you're telling me I can call my mom at lunch. Like, that's kind of fun, and, you're telling me that like, I'm going to have, a visit with the counselor and we're going to go through a list of how I could come up with strategies. Like, okay, that sounds like something I want to do. And he did. Like, he would meet with the guidance counselor. He met with the mental health specialist for the district, and she gave him a list of things like, well, what are you worried about today? And he would write all his worries down, and she would go with him line by line and come up with different ways. Like, well, if a teacher calls on you and you don't know the answer, just know that you're not the only one. This happens to everybody. And you can just say, I don't know, and you move on. And nobody cares. Like, nobody's that focused. And that's another thing. He had what they called social performance anxiety. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he was always so afraid what everyone thought. And kids are so self-centered and they're so self-focused that of course they're going to think to themselves or say to themselves, well, everybody's looking at me, everybody's going to think this way, but everybody's worried about themselves. And that's what they were trying to get across to my son. Like, as worried as you are, other kids are just as worried about the very same thing. So the focus isn't always on you, and they just went through it in a way that he understood, and he could come home with like a physical list that he can like hang on the fridge. I remember he was worried that he was going to forget something. So the mental health specialist like they made a list of things that you would need to bring to school, your backpack, your lunch, your homework, a note from mom, like, anything like that. And we would just tack it up on the fridge, and just having that visual cue of, okay, do I have my pencils today? Do I have my homework for today? Just really helped. So I think the school in his case was just so very helpful. And I remember when I was little, like, that wasn't the case. I mean, it just wasn't the same. I mean, times are different. They're definitely erring on the side of like more mental health focus, more help for kids, more help for the parents. Like, you need that support. I don't know how my parents did it. I don't know how they got me to school. All I know is I ended up going, and they always used to say to me, like, you're going to fall further and further behind. And, that could trigger an anxious response. But for me, it was like kind of like a wake up call. Like, I don't want to fall further behind. I want to be on the same level as my friends and, my classmates. I don't want to be in that hole. And, just hearing that was something that helped me. But it's so hard because you can say that to a kid and they can take it the completely wrong way, and it could, further exacerbate the anxiety. So it's such a delicate balance. I mean, school refusal is so hard. I mean, there are these groups on Facebook that I follow, the school refusal like support groups and things like that. And these parents, I mean, they're going on months and months of kids just not attending school. And it's such a problem. And it's such a fine line, like how to get through to kids. And I think when they're little, and if you have a book like this, it's a good starting point, because I think the older they get, the more difficult it becomes. And like I said, with my son, I mean, this has been going on since he was in second grade, and he's now in eighth grade. And we still have those mornings where we can't get him up, like we can't get him to go to school. And it definitely gets harder as they get older. So if
Their
there's
bodies together, it's much harder to get them out of the car.
yeah, I mean, so if there's something that we could use when they're small, and try to like influence their young brains, for lack of a better term, because when you have a teenager who's struggling to get out of bed and struggling to go to school, like a book like this isn't going to help. Like, we need more support for sure.
Yeah. I think we probably should have said this earlier in the episode, but we are talking about a pattern, like a more so a school refusal. We're talking about not the one-off day of kiddos not wanting to go to school, but kind of a pattern of refusal, like a
Mm-hmm.
sustained daily in and out. And I was looking through statistics, and it looked like up to 28% of kids will experience this at some point in their
Mm-hmm.
education career. And while you were talking, I was thinking, we've given a lot of elementary level examples, and minus your sons. And I always think about that too. This actually could be really just developmentally normal for kids to wish they could be at home or want to be with their mom, particularly like kindergarten or first graders,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was thinking about, my son is a-okay going to preschool. He doesn't care, he loves it, but he's kind of like, that's just what people do. My mom said we go to
Yep.
preschool, so I go to preschool. No big deal. But even he could benefit from the book, just understanding, um, even though he doesn't refuse school, like this is what we do. We kind of go to school, and let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
these factors that might come up at some time, because 28% is one in like six, what, 5.5 to 6 children will experience the refusal at some point in their lives.
Right. And even if he's not experiencing it right now, he might have a friend at school who is, and it might help him, develop some empathy towards their situations, and, not think that those kids are weird, or, things like that. I mean, I think it's beneficial in that way as well.
Or, yeah.
Just the perspective. I always like harp on that word perspective. Like, I think it just gives kids a different perspective associated with going to school, appreciating school, just where you fit in, and, you know,
Yeah. I think, to be fair, I do work with teenagers, and if I had a book like this, I do sometimes read these books to our teenagers, and
mhm.
I tell them, like, I know it's super lame. I know you're too old for this. Just humor me for a second, because then we develop a shared language for discussing school refusal, right?
Mhm.
There's like, hey, remember, what's the character's name for you?
She actually doesn't have a
Well,
name.
so it can be
Yeah,
any.
it could be anybody.
Yeah, remember our book, right? Like, child talk to the teen. Remember that book? It's just like that. Remember, what did she go through? And so even though we have less of these resources, I think if we wrote a teen version book, they wouldn't read it anyways.
Right.
But a book like this, I can use across the age span, and just our relationship has to be pretty
Analyze it.
good.
They can analyze it in a different way than a
Yes.
kindergartner would look at it. So
And
they
it's a quick read. We can do it in the session. I do have to have a good relationship with them, because I have to be able to like say, hey, I know, yeah, like I know you're too old for this, but just go with me for a second. So just in our final minutes, Stephanie, let's go to you and tell us, how do you think parents could use this at home?
I think if there's an inclination that there's, anxiety or elements of school refusal, if, the kid is complaining about stomach aches or things that you said, like, physical manifestations of anxiety, if they're vocalizing, I don't want to go to school today and this is why, there are real life reasons why kids don't want to go to school in this book. And you can look to it and look to the example, look to the rules that they're being established by the kid, look to the solution that they're coming to on their own. I think it's a good way to start that conversation. Read the book, start the conversation. Well, sandcastles don't have to go to school, but if they did, they'd be fine. And, why do you think that is? Like, do you feel like you can relate to that, to the sandcastle today? Like, do you feel like, I'm trying to think why the sandcastle didn't want to go to school. The sandcastle didn't want to go to school because they didn't want to talk in front of the whole class. Is that something that you feel like that you're experiencing? And, how can you go about just opening up those conversations with your kids and utilizing this book and kind of like as a talking, for talking points and things like that. And I just think that it's a good option to have in your back pocket, in your home library, something to pull out, something you can read together. The illustrations are so fun and vibrant. I think kids will relate to that as well. And, it opens up a lot of conversations, I think, around the topic.
I love that. And you made the point earlier, that what works for a kid is personalized. And I think this book can be great for parents to empower themselves. Like no one is a better expert on my child but me. I promise you that. you know. And that's a great way. Because my daughter tried calling me at lunch. We could not. We did that one day, and I was like, no. It just engaged the like begging, take me home, mom, take me home. But for some kids, that is an option. But this is a great way for parents when we're feeling desperate and we don't know what to do. Empowering the parent that you are always the best expert on your child. No one will be a better expert on your child. And here's a good way to start talking to them about what, when we go to advocate for ourselves at the school and things that we need, what is it that will work for you? So
And I think it lets the child know, like, hey, we hear you. Like, we understand. Like, we understand that this is something that you're going through and we want to help. And I think for kids just to know that and to feel safe in that environment and to know, like, I'm not alone. I mean, a book like that exists because you're not alone. I mean, it was written because the author went through it and her son went through it and her son's friends have gone through it. I mean, you're not alone. And for a kid to hear that, I think is comforting in and of itself.
mm-hmm. And 2 therapists on this podcast went
Yes.
So Tiana, how do you think, so our fellow therapists out there treating kids or working in the schools, how do you think it could help their practice in working with these kiddos?
Think in just the same way that Stephanie described, as far as like starting the conversation and normalizing what's happening for the kids. I use books all the time with my kid clients so that we can open up a topic for conversation and then have somebody that the kid can look to that says like, oh, I'm like that, or I felt that way before, or my friend did that, or so I think just that it just normalizes what's been going on for the kid and helps spark the conversation in the therapy office, just the same way it does with the parent. I also like the component of like the how she comes to the conclusion that it's not all bad, And I think that's something that I try to weave into my sessions with kids, is like finding, okay, yes, there's the negative side. I don't want to get rid of that. Like it is scary to be away from your mom. And what's the other side? They're both can exist too. So, and when I go to school, I get to play at recess with my friends, and that's pretty great. I don't get to do that at home. So being able to help guide kids into seeing not just the darkness, but also the light.
I want to make one kind of, maybe it's a disclaimer or whatever. We've talked a lot about anxiety in this episode. And that is because off the top of my head, I can't really think of other reasons why kids have school refusal. It typically comes down to anxiety. Um, Even if it's like my child's school refusal comes from disability, but the disability has created an anxiety being at school. So, or any of the trauma, anxiety type things, maybe depression. Maybe there's some depression in there that might do it. But just for any parent listening, some of the biggest signs of anxiety in your kid that you can watch out for is frequent headaches, stomach aches, um, like the worrying that looks like worrying about things that like maybe would never even happen. But just constantly worried about things, fixated on it, nightmares at night, difficulty falling asleep or stirred. Like um, sometimes you see kids waking up at night, but not because of nightmares. They're just their brain is so active. But I would say, what about you, Tina, too? I think the stomach aches and the headaches are the biggest things that I see that make me think
Maybe
anxiety.
more irritable, quicker
I was
to,
going to say mood swings,
yeah,
definitely.
quicker to angry outbursts. I think a lot of times anger is demonstrated rather than like a meltdown of sadness or tears. But
Yeah. I like how you said that, quicker to anger, because I was like, like my daughter is this like doe-eyed sweetheart. And I wouldn't call her irritable all the time, but when she's anxious and when anxiety's high, she's super quick to like snap at people. And so I like how you said that. It's not that they're irritable and angry all the time, but their reactions maybe are out of proportion, or you're getting bigger reactions than normal for a child.
maybe less flexibility in changes,
Mhm.
like if normally they're okay with like switching from playtime to dinner time, and then for some reason that's shifting, and for some reason, so like difficulty with transitions might be a new sign
That
to watch.
looks like for my child, if we missed the bus, or one
Mhm.
morning I was like, I'm going to take you to a fun breakfast, just you and I. And it was like the worst because it messed up her morning, right? Like she's used to getting on the bus, walking to her class, finding her teacher, like, and even though it was super fun for a child that's anxious, yeah, that keeping in that flexibility is just not as
Yeah.
present for them. I
Mhm.
could see a lot of value of this in a children's therapist office,
Mhm.
in the school setting for sure. And then for parents. So Stephanie, tell us, where can people listening find your book?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to show it to you again. It's No School, My Rules. And I'm going to just cue you in on like a little secret. It is on sale. It's on sale right now on Amazon. And it's originally for the hardcover, it's $18.99. It's on sale for $12.95. So it's
Nice.
the lowest price point that I've seen online for this hardcover version of the book. So, I mean, Amazon, your local independent bookstores might have it. I know Barnes and Noble online has it. I don't think you're going to get lower than the $12.95 on Amazon, though, to be honest. I'm a supporter of Amazon. I think that they allow books and indie authors and small press authors to have a reach beyond what we're capable of on our own. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I know bookshop.org is another one that has it. I don't know what the price point is on that site, but that does support local independent bookshops. So if you want to support your local indie, you can get it that way. But I just wanted to mention that it is on sale on Amazon right now. So
And we'll put some links in the episode notes so people can find it really quick. But
I'll
thank you
put
for
in a plug too for your public library. If your public library doesn't have it and you
oh,
request,
that's a good point.
they will, in most cases, get a book if
Mhm.
you request it. So check out your library and see if they have it. And if not, request that they purchase it for your
that's
child.
and that's a fantastic way to support authors too. If it's not in your library,
Absolutely.
request that they bring it into the library so everybody can enjoy it. I love that. Thanks for joining us, Stephanie. I hope you're staying warm.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, we're supposed to get some snow tomorrow. We'll see if it actually happens.
We're like dying in Utah we haven't
Not too
really
much.
gotten anything. It's crazy. You guys are getting it over there. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us on the Therapist Book Club. We hope today's conversation inspired you to explore new stories and perspectives.
Don't forget to follow us for more episodes, share your favorite books with us, and join the conversation on how books and mental health connect on our social media channels.
Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, your story matters.